Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Beyond the Basics. I am Aaron Bjork, lead shepherd and elder of Fellowship of the Cross. We're continuing to look into the pseudepigraphical book of Enoch. And we find ourselves scripturally in the book of Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6, one of those chapters that seemingly gets glazed over from many pulpits. We might make reference to it. It gets read as a scripture reading, and then we mention a couple of the verses and seemingly ignore the rest, maybe try to explain it away. Not only do I think that that's dangerous and heretical to do so, because Paul accurately says all scripture is useful for teaching, preaching, training, and rebuking in righteousness. It is all God-breathed. Just because we don't understand it, that doesn't mean we should be avoiding it. That means we should be diving into it deeper. So we need to look at this. We need to examine this. And we need to find out what is being said. But not only on top of that, I believe that Genesis chapter 6 is one of the most important passages in Scripture, especially in the Old Testament, because it gives us a glimpse into the program of the devil and what he is about and was about in those times and continuing to be about and will be about in the end times. His program. Let's take a look at Genesis chapter 6. And I'm reading for the New American Standard. Now it came about when men, and the word here is Adam, or children of men. There's many times the word man or men is used. It'll translate into different things in the Old Testament or in the original Hebrew. So it's important to understand the context here. And many times when the word men or man is used and the word is Adam, it specifically means the children of Adam. You might say, well, we're all children of Adam. In the Old Testament, there were children of others as well. And this, the book of Genesis chapter 6 makes reference to that. So now it came about when men, the children of Adam, began to multiply in the face of the land, that daughters were born to them. And then the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. And then the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man, that is Adam, forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. Some people say that means that at this point, that's when God said human beings can only live to be 120 years old. Well, that's ridiculous because in recent times, someone lived to be 121. So that means that that would be a false statement. But on top of that, we know that it was about 120 years from this point is when the flood waters came to be. And so that is, at least of my opinion, that is what is going on here. I will not strive with the children of Adam or Adam forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days from this point forward are 120 years. Then verse 4, the Nephilim. The Nephilim. In some Bibles, they says giants, which comes from a word gigantes, which doesn't necessarily mean big, huge things. It just means something that is different, something that is a what we would have modern science, a genetic malformation, DNA alteration, something that is not purely of human DNA. And so the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also after those days. So it's not just before the flood, but it's also after the flood. So we have to ask ourselves, how is that possible? Why does that take place? And so we continue that discussion as we go forward. In those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men. In translation from the Hebrew, the word is giborim. Giborim is a word that means something that is different from man, something that is different than what typically comes out of the womb of a woman. And so that doesn't just mean bad people, which is sometimes what we might hear in some theological circles. That's erroneous and heretical. So the Bible's not saying that. These are genetic malformations. These Nephilim were on the earth in those days and afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and bore children to them. These were the Giborim of old, the men of renown. Now, the word men here is not Adam. The word here is Enosh. And it can mean sometimes describing human beings or the children of Adam when they are being sinful or when they are committing bad behavior or they are degraded. But it also can make reference, David uses the word in the Psalms and sometimes when making reference to the giants that he killed. Many times when the word Enosh is used, it's referring to Goliath and those other individuals, giants, the King Anak, whose bed was 18 feet long, those types of things. And then verse 5, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every intent of his thoughts of his heart was only evil continually, and the Lord was sorry that he had made man, the word is Adam, on the earth, so making reference and a difference between Enosh and Adam, on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And the Lord said, I will blot out man, from whom I have created from the face of the land, from man to animals to creepy things and to birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I have made him. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And then this is Genesis 6:9. These are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Noah walked with God. Now, many translators, they say that means that Noah was sinless or Noah was righteous. Noah was perfect. He wasn't as bad. Everyone else was punching Jimmy in the face, and Noah just refrained from doing so. And so that's why Noah was saved, because he was a good guy. That's not, when you go to the original translation, what's really being said. If Noah was so good, why did he get drunk when he got off the boat? And his 3 pure sons, one of them had homosexual thoughts towards him. That doesn't sound like sinless people. That sounds like they got some issues going on there. You got to remember, the flood didn't come because Johnny's punching Jimmy. The flood came because of genetic malformations and DNA corruption that was going on from the fallen angels. If the flood comes because of sin, I don't know about you, but when I look around, I realize we better all start wearing life jackets. There's a lot of sin in the world today, but God doesn't always just bring judgment. God brings judgment, especially mass extinction type level, ELE, extinction level event type judgment, when there's something going on which comes against his garden creation program. Okay, so we have to understand this is very important to realize. Blameless in his time, righteous man. What it basically means is this, translating from the Hebrew, is to make inclination that Noah's bloodline was not corrupted. That's what's going on here. So there was something special about Noah that didn't have a corruption in his seed, a corruption in his genome. And so he was chosen as a fit extension for God to be able to continue his program of bringing about the Messiah through the seed of Adam. Okay, that's what's going on here. Now, what does this have to do with Enoch? Well, in the book of Enoch, chapter 6 and chapter 7, we see almost a very similar thing. Now, some people will say that Enoch took, or the writer of Enoch took from Moses in the book of Genesis. I think it's the other way around. Moses is making reference from Enoch because Enoch is much more detailed, and Moses makes reference. This is the book of Enoch, chapter 6. It came to pass in those days that the children of men multiplied, and beautiful and fair daughters were born unto them. And the angels, the sons of heaven, there it makes clarity there, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, come, let us choose wives from among the children of men, and beget children. And their leader, Semyaza, said to them, I am afraid that you will not truly agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty of this great sin. And they all answered, and they said, we should all swear to bind ourselves by a mutual oath, not to abandon this plan, but to do this one thing together. And so all of them bound themselves together by an oath. There were 200 total of these fallen angels that descended in the days of Jared upon Ardis, the summit of Mount Hermon. Now we know, when we make reference, most scholars believe that Mount Hermon was the mountain that Jesus, near Caesarea Philippi, decided to take his disciples for the transfiguration. Now, if we don't understand why Mount Hermon was so important, namely because of what is said in the book of Enoch, then we don't really understand the transfiguration. Do you see why it's vitally important that we know these things? So altogether they bound themselves, and they descended upon Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by this oath upon it. And then it gives the names of these fallen angels, and then it says that these are the leaders of the rest. Then the book of Enoch, chapter 7, each of the 200 chose a wife for himself, and they began to go unto them and to mate with them, and they taught them sorcery and enchantments and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And these women became pregnant and gave birth to great giants whose height reached up to 3,000 ells. I don't know what an ell is, but that's pretty big. These giants consumed all the food, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them, and they devoured mankind. And they also began to sin against birds, against beasts, reptiles, and fish, which means they were having these unholy unions and committing bestiality. That's what's going on. And to devour one another's flesh, and to drink blood. Why do you think the Bible commands us not to drink blood? Isn't that interesting? And then the earth laid accusation against these fallen ones. Now, there's a lot of things that are going on here, especially as we continue in the book of Genesis, chapter 6. We hear this story. I remember the flannel graph board as a kid and learning about Noah and the ark. And Noah 2 by 2 and 7 by 7. And then it says this, looking here in the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 20, of the birds after their kind, the animals after their kind, of every creeping thing of the ground after their kind, 2 of every kind shall come to you, and you shall keep them alive. Have you ever wondered, why does the Bible say after their kind? Well, it's very clear, because there were animals after their kind, and there were animals that were not after their kind. That translates to something very clearly in science. We have animals that are after animals. A bird begats a bird, right? Or a sparrow begats a sparrow. But then we have genetic malformations. When we see very clearly, we make references, not just in the book of Enoch, but it's also other pseudepigraphical writings as well. This fallen angel program. Now, you may be saying, wait a second, doesn't Jesus very clearly say that when we die, we will go to heaven and we will not marry or give in marriage, but we will be like the angels? In other words, we won't be sexual. We won't be able to reproduce. That's correct. Jesus said the angels in heaven. Now, I made reference to this before in the book of Jude. It makes clear that these angels derobed themselves from that heavenly, that non-sexual body and took upon a physical form so they could engage in this behavior. Now, maybe you're someone who has believed that these sons of God were different types of human beings, and they saw the daughters of men, that the sons of God were holy men, and the daughters of men were sinful women, or the sons of Seth and the daughters of Cain. That is proposed. Well, there's lots of problems with that. And the main biggest one that I'll make reference to is, holy men and unholy women do not produce 12-foot people with 6 fingers and 6 toes. We very clearly have something going on here that caused God to get so angry that he decided to literally wipe out the entire population of the planet. That doesn't even happen in the book of Revelation until the very end. So it's very clear there's no grace. There's grace and opportunity for salvation in the book of Revelation, but there's none here. People say, well, Noah was a preacher of righteousness. Yes, but he preached it afterwards because he told Noah very clearly, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives will get on the ark, and everyone else will be destroyed. Folks, we've got to relook at this. We've got to examine this. It's just a weird passage with a lot of strange stuff. But if we're not willing to look at the weird, we might not be able to fully understand what it is that God is saying. I encourage you to dive into this book of Enoch and some of the other pseudepigraphical writings, not because they're scriptural, but because when they contribute to the harmony of the text, they can augment our understanding, and they can help lead us and point us in the right direction in our interpretation. Thank you for joining us here on Beyond the Basics. Be blessed and be a blessing.